Hello, fantastic creatures! I'm Fantasims, and what is this sensitivity warning you see before you? Well, I attempted to make a medieval-styled feast with a roast beast, like with those full hog roasts. I personally find them disturbing, but what I created was even more horrifying. So, you have a couple of seconds to turn away if the image of a half-eaten beast in The Sims will upset you. Still here? Okay, here we go. And here it is in all its horrifying glory. This is a feast fit for a creepy ruler. And as you can see, this is the roast beast that I came up with. And originally I had put in a lot more of the meat. This is actually a rock. What rock is this? Flamingonium. And I had covered a bit more of the body, but it was just making it look even creepier. So I made it look kind of like part of it has been eaten, which is also super creepy. And here we have all these little plates of food that I've put together with a bunch of debug objects. And in live mode, we've got some animation going on which make it look a lot more lively. Unfortunately, as you can see, and as you guys probably know, there's a ton of decorations that just disappear when you zoom in live mode, which really stinks when you've put in all that effort to put in the detail, but that's okay. So we've got all these cluttered banquet areas on this massive table and on this side as well. And if you follow me on Twitter, you know that ever since the anniversary and then the bunk bed update, my game has been acting so crazy. I cannot work on any of my big builds, which is why I haven't posted a video in a while. So I've decided to work on some smaller projects like making rooms like this and making some tiny builds. And it also means that I wasn't able to film a speed build of me making this, but it's a perfect opportunity for me to show you how to use toolmod in build mode. It's a huge update that just came out a week ago. It's the mod I use to rotate objects and do all of this crazy kind of stuff. If you follow me on my channel, you know that I'm always using it in pretty much every build. But if you also use TwistedMexi's other mod called the Better Build By mod, they now work in conjunction together so that you can use tool in build mode. So normally toolmod was only possible in live mode, and you would have to shift and then click on an object, click tool, and then do all the actions like rotate, elevate, scale, all that kind of stuff. But now in build mode we can do it, and it's super easy. The mechanism is pretty much the same. You hold down the shift key and the T at the same time and it will pop up the toolmod menu, and instead of shift clicking on objects, you can just click on an object and it will automatically highlight it, and you can do the same things as you normally would. So for example, if I wanted to duplicate this little bun over here, I can just click on it, it highlights green, and then hold down shift and the alt key at the same time, click on it again, and it will duplicate it. If I want it over here, I can click it on the floor, and there it is. You'll see it, and it'll remain highlighted. And then I can rotate like you normally would. Let's do it by like 10 degrees. There you go. So it still works the exact same way. It's just that some of these features are slightly different. But I'm really going to go over the benefits of it, because when it comes to doing things as a group, it is so much easier now. So let's say I want to select a bunch of objects, hold down the alt key like you normally would. And let's say I want to control the group. I don't have to shift click on the objects anymore. I can just do it from here over here in the menu. So let's say I want to elevate by 1. Like that. Super easy. If I want to undo, you just click on options and then undo. And then to go back to rotating and elevating, just click back, and then you're back to the original menu. One of the things I love about it being in build mode now is for something like this, for example. Let's say that I decide I want to duplicate this, so I'm shift and alt clicking. And let's say I want that duplicated version to be a lot smaller than this one. So I decide to scale it, and let's say I want to make it super tiny, so we'll make it like 0.1. Now those objects are so small they're lost inside this big one. And so when toolmod was only available in live mode, you'd have to try it. You wouldn't be able to find that object inside another one, if that makes sense. So now it's still highlighted, and because I don't have to shift click on it anymore, I can just go over to the control panel and let's say elevate it so I can see where it is. We'll elevate it by 1, and there it is. It's super tiny, and it's rearranged itself because I've put them all at the same size, and here they're different sizes. But anyway, you can see now you can control it without having to worry about trying to locate the object. And then the second thing I love so much about it being in build mode is we can now alt place objects on the grid system. So before I would have to use walls and fences along the grid lines so that when I was in live mode and you didn't have the grid system, I would know where to click on the ground. But now in build mode, I can click on the grid system and it will place it exactly along those lines. So let's say you just want to shift it over a little bit, but you don't want to go off center. You can just click on the grid lines and keep it perfectly straight. And if I hold the alt key, I can just nudge it over slightly and it'll stay along that perfect line. Something important to note is when you're still in the tool menu by clicking the shift and the T keys, you won't be able to do regular adjustments like deleting something. It'll just select it. So when something's green, just click on it again like you normally would. And if you want to go back to editing like you normally would in build mode, you're just going to hit the shift and the T again and it will close that menu up, and then you can go back to doing the regular stuff like deleting and moving stuff around like so. Okay, so for this video I'm not going to really go any more in depth with all the different new nuances that come with tool in build mode. TwistedMexi actually has tutorials on his channel. I'll put a link in the description below that goes into depth with those things, and my in-depth tutorial on toolmod is still applicable. It's just now you can do in build mode instead of live mode. So for the rest of this video I'm just going to real quick show you you how I created some of these custom objects, because I know that a lot of times you guys on Twitter especially look at this stuff and you're like, what objects did you use? How did you put them all together? So I will show you. So for example, let's recreate some of these tiny little bowls that I made here. Oh, and I forgot to mention, if you're not familiar with organized debug, if you want to just use toolmod in build mode but not use the organized debug, you can always unclick it. So it's right here, it has its own category, and you can just turn it off. But I love it. This and toolmod are my favorite because look, you can go over into the menu over here and you can look at live edit objects, you can look at debug objects, and everything has been organized, and all the debug that never had a name before, it was just called debug, now has names to it. So you can actually search for debug objects, which you can't do if you don't have this mod. And my favorite part of this is that you can duplicate it with the shift key, which is something you normally cannot do with debug objects. So that's what I'm going to do here. So this is a debug object. I'm just going to shift click it and woo, it's big. And then I use this cauldron from Realm of Magic. It's also very big. We're just going to put that in the center. And what I chose to do when I'm aligning objects, I find that it's easier to work on the grid system and then later on use toolmod to drag it where I want it to go. And remember to press the F5 button, F5. If it's not pressed, it only works on the big solid white lines. But if F5 is pressed, you can place it between the grid lines. So then what I did is Shift T to pull up the tool menu, and I just clicked on this one and we are going to scale it. And I can't remember what size I did, so let's test it out. I think it might have been 0.1. Nope, that's too big. 0.05, that's still too big. So it might have been, we're going to hit scale, 0.025. I think that's closer. Let's scale this one down so we can see. I'm going to scale that one to 0.1. Almost, actually. That seems accurate. This one doesn't. So let's redo that one. And I'm just clicking on it. It's super easy. Scale 0.03. Let's try that one. Getting better. 0.04. I think it was less than that. 0.028. Nope. I forgot it's supposed to be, I think, 0.038, not 28. That's why it went too small. Close enough. So we're just going to leave it there. And then, because I want to duplicate this object, I'm going to have to exit out of Tool. So just Shift T, and then I'm going to duplicate this pile. It's like a archaeological dig from Jungle Adventure. I'm going to size it down, but it's still too big. So let's bring up Tool menu again, Shift T. And it did take me some getting used to at first because I'm so used to shift clicking on objects. But after about 2 or 3 days, I no longer try and shift click on everything. And we're going to scale this to, let's try 0.2, see how small that goes. No, not small enough. 0.1, that was a bit too small. 0.15, that's a bit too big. 0.13, still a bit too big, but let's elevate it so we can get a greater sense of the size. And I'm going to elevate it by 0.01 because I'm working with such a small area. Okay, scrap that. I need to elevate it more than that. Let's try 0.1 instead of 0.01. Oh, that's a bit too much. Minus 0.05, a bit more, 0.02. Much better. Okay, so now we can scale it, and see, I'm not having to shift click on it over and over. I can control it completely by the tool menu. So this time let's try 0.12. Better. Maybe 0.1 is okay. 0.1. Okay, so 0.1 was the magic number. It is poking through a little bit, so let's redo it. Scale 0.09. There we go. That's pretty good. I mean, there are a few little gaps here and there, but that's fine. And then I'm just going to click on it again to stop it from being green. Shift T to exit out of that menu. And then I'm going to duplicate this little fork. Well, it's called a fork, but it's more like a shovel. And this is from debug from Eco Lifestyle. I'm just going to size it down. Hit the Alt key and the 9 just to get a sense of where to place it, like that. Great, and then I'm going to Shift T to pull up that tool menu again. I'm going to select that spoon, fork, shovel thing, and we are going to rotate it. Change the axis, because that's the wrong one. Okay, that's the right one. And I want to pull it forward, so it's going to be a positive number. So let's try just rotating it something small like 10, and that's actually quite perfect. And that's basically how I came up with these arrangements. It is a lot of trial and error, but the cool thing is, even though this took me I think it took me like 2.5 to 3 days to finish it all, but the great thing about it is now I have all of these collections that if I just do the alt placement like this, where I just hold the Alt key and click on all of these objects, in future builds I can just click where I want them to go and rearrange them, and I've already created these custom objects that I can put in different arrangements on different kinds of tables. Okay, now I'll quickly take you step by step how I came up with the process of creating the feast, because as you guys know, objects lock onto table surfaces. So what I actually did was I created it on the floor first, and in order to get a sense of where I needed to arrange things on the floor so that I could later elevate everything up onto the surface, I used like a stick. I later made the table bigger than this, but originally I started out with this size, and I just lined up where the chair was, and I put where I thought like a plate should go. So I think I lined it up with this seam in the wood right here, and I just did that along the entire table and made sure, obviously I'm just doing it quick so it's not aligned properly, but I just put all these sticks there, and then I put sticks around the edge of the table to get a sense of this is where the end of the table is, and don't put any objects any further than this. So that's how I set up the parameters of what I was about to do. And then here's what it started to look like in the beginning phases. So you can see these poles are where I wanted to place the plates, and then I just rotated them on a 90-degree angle to create lines to shape where the edges of the table would be. So real quick, I'll show you. Just Shift-T, click on the object, rotate, wrong axis, so change axis, and just do 90 degrees to make it flush on the ground. And if it rotates the wrong way, that's actually the right way, but if it were to rotate the other way, you can just rotate it again by 180 degrees and it'll just flip it the other way. But we don't need that piece to be like that, so I'm just going to undo it, click on it again, Shift-T to exit out. And basically, I just started rotating and layering objects the way that I thought they would look good on the table. And this is the beginning of the beast. It doesn't look so creepy when it's just the skeleton, but it's when I started to add the stone that looks kind of like meat that it got particularly horrifying. Anyway, so in order to do the plates, because we don't have plates in the game other than these stacked plates from Snowy Escape, I used these ones from Jungle Adventure and I lowered them onto the table. So Shift-T, click on it, and just playing around with elevations. So minus 0.01. Okay, that's not enough. Minus 0.02, getting better. Minus 0.02, that might be too much. Actually, that's perfect. So I just lowered it there, and then I just came up with objects that I could hide this black piece that's sticking out. I used map scrolls as napkins. I layered buns like this in baskets. Now, a lot of food doesn't save to gallery, so what I have done previously is I saved all the debug food into a room, then took out all of my mods, like, because they will load from the library if you have Better Build Buy installed, so I removed that, and then placed the lot without any cheats on, without anything other than move objects, and whatever pieces of food and cutlery and whatever remained, I knew that I could use those in builds that I upload to the gallery. So these seem to remain, so hopefully they will load from the gallery. Anyway, so I just stacked them on top of this basket from Jungle Adventure. I just used these spoons from Realm of Magic sized down. I filled these outdoor retreat jars I put inside the basket from, I think, is this from Laundry Day or no, Eco Lifestyle? And then I wanted to use this as a wood platform, but I didn't like all the tropical flowers on it. It doesn't really go with a medieval style. So I took this debug sack of flour and elevated it with toolmod to make sure that it was sitting nice on top. Now you can kind of see some petals poking through, but you know what, it's fine. And then creating a custom jug of ale. These are like the unfinished archaeological things from Jungle Adventure, and it's just the Omiscan vases. And I sized down a basket to give it some handles at the base. And then for the drink inside, it's a debug ultimate vampire cure, and I love it because in live mode it gives off this funky steam. It actually kind of makes it look putrid, but that's okay. And then I just wanted to come up with my own custom vases, so I just layered a bunch of objects on top of each other, like Journey to Batuu. This is also Journey to Batuu. This is also Journey to Batuu. But when you resize them and layer them on top of each other, you can come up with your own little custom jars. And I did that for this one here. These are debug Eiffel Tower clay sculptures from base game. I just turned them upside down. And then over here to make like a barrel of potatoes, I just used this bucket from Snowy Escape, and then the new buckets of food from the Country Kitchen kit. And the thing I love about these buckets is the different swatches come with different fruits and vegetables. So you've got apples, potatoes, lemons, oranges, and onions. So it's cool because with the different swatches you can come up with different varieties. And it's morbid, I know, that I put it on top of a coffin. I know some of the comments when I posted it on Twitter asking if it was too disturbing and if I should continue, I did get some comments about it's a bit disturbing that it's on a coffin, and it's true. I was just using it as like an elevated platform that my goal was to then decorate it so it wouldn't look so much like a coffin. Alrighty, so then this was the finished result before I elevated everything, which was quite a tedious process. And in order to make it not look so much like a coffin, I used these ornate mirrors right here. I tilted them forward by I think maybe 10 degrees, duplicated, and then rotated by 180 degrees so you get a mirror image. And then to further hide the fact that it's a coffin, I tilted sized down statues, these Journey to Batuu lightsabers, added some foliage, added some more ornate. I mean, it kind of cuts into this display over here, but shh, we'll just pretend it doesn't. Now for the plates of food, I used debug fish, debug seaweed, I think this seaweed is actually base game, debug potatoes, debug carrots, and then I used balls of yarn that I sized down to look like peas, because normally, I mean, you can see the yarn fibers, but when you just size them down with the left bracket key, you just get these tiny little peas. I sized down the machete, and then these salad bowls were actually quite tricky because I made them so small. But this is just a clay sculpture from base game, but I turned these wreaths from, I think these ones are from Seasons or from the holiday pack, I can't remember, but I flipped them upside down and then sized them. I had to size so many different ones, so they get slightly smaller and smaller so you can fit them inside of each other. See how tiny they started to get? I just wanted to make it look like it was a perfectly round salad. And then I thought it would be nice to have this ornate ceramic canopy over the top just to give it a bit of shape. And so in order to figure out the angles for this, I just took these posts from Discover University and I used one in the center of the feast as a guide. So Shift T to pull up the tool menu, and then I selected both of these posts on the outside, and I only decorated half of it, and then so that I could just copy and paste and swivel it around to do on the other side. That way you're not recreating all four of them. And I rotated both of them -90 to put them flat on the ground like that. And then I needed to figure out what angle would go in here, and it worked out to be 22 degrees. So we're going to rotate it on a different axis, change the axis, and wrong way. So I'll just do -44 to flip it the other way. And currently that doesn't look like it lines up because I put this too close. This was actually more like there. And so see how that lines really nicely there. And then I realized that I actually wanted this to be at the center, which is totally fine because you can just move it over. Okay, so then when I had them both where I wanted them, I just alt-click the other one and then elevate. Let's try elevate it by 1. I don't remember all the numbers I used to elevate stuff, so I'm guessing again. Good enough, we'll just use that for right now. And then I rotated them at an angle because I want to tilt them like a roof, so that's the correct one. And I can't remember whether it's a positive or a negative. Oh, I think it's a negative. So let's do, I think I did -20. It might have been a bit more than that, something like that. And then all I did was I resized it to make sure that it fit perfectly. And then I just used objects like these urns, a lot of Journey to Batuu stuff. I love Journey to Batuu stuff, not just for sci-fi, but just it looks really cool for ancient stuff. And see, I'm just layering urns and vases, flipped some upside down, resized them, and it's very simple. The construction is actually very simple. It looks very complex, but what makes it complicated is just it's time consuming, and so I guess it does take a lot of patience to put it all together. And then over here I turned this pile of wax from Paranormal into a candle by using this debug fence post size down. I think original size, that's how big it is, so I just scaled it down real tiny with the tool mod because that's as small as you can do it with the bracket keys. And then I sized down this candle because it has this really cool flame animation on it and turned it into a candle. Now this video is going to be too long if I break down every single thing I did, so what you can do is you can just download this room from the gallery and pull it apart. So then the very last step was just trying to figure out how high to elevate it, and this is really important. I wouldn't recommend selecting everything with toolmod and guessing as you go. It's better to try it out with an object first, although I have to admit I did it wrong, but I'll explain that in a second. And basically what I did is I just clicked on the object and I played around with how high to elevate it for this top runner that's taller and then this lower part of the table. So I took a flat object like this or a plank of wood or whatever, and I just played around. So let's elevate it by 1 and see what happens. It's too high, so we're going to undo 0.9, almost but not quite. To speed up this whole video and process, I'll just say that it was actually 0.9425. Yes, it was that ridiculously precise, and it sat perfectly on top, or so I thought. So then this one was 0.8425, and I thought, yay, I've cracked it. I've cracked the code. That's the exact number I'm going to need. But I'll show you what happened in a second. In order to elevate everything, because there are so many object pieces, I found it better to do in sections, and I just went around and alt-clicked on everything I could. Now some things are layered, so you have to do it in several attempts, like these salad bowls. Holy cow, they took so long to do. And I'm just clicking on a bunch of objects, and I like to only choose a handful at a time because I'm notorious for accidentally clicking on the ground and shifting all the objects over, and the undo feature works great, but sometimes it can not move the entire group back to where it was. Okay, so let's say I was happy with that. Then I would elevate, because this is the lower part of the table, I did it by 0.8425. Perfect. And then it leaves behind these objects, so then I just went around, clicked on that, and then alt-clicked everything else, so on and so forth until I had elevated everything. So I started off with this middle section first because that was needed to be elevated at the higher level, and then I moved on to the lower parts of the table. So then once I had elevated everything, I thought, great, I just took that room and placed it on top of the room I had of tables and chairs, and I realized that I had actually miscalculated and it was slightly off and things were cutting into the table, and I thought, there is no way I am going to click on all of those objects and elevate them again. So then I just thought of a sneaky solution. So you see here how this is clipping through the table. I took the object and I played around with how much to elevate it by, and it turned out that it needed to be elevated by 0.0075, a very tiny degree, but just enough to get it to sit right on top of the surface. And I was like, there's no way, I am not going to do this with all of these objects again. It took forever. So instead what I did was I clicked on all the table pieces. I'll just show you with 2 pieces right here, and I lowered them by that amount. So I elevated it by minus 0.0075 and then everything was on top, and that was so much easier than going through and changing everything. And the cool thing is that even though I lowered it, Sims can still sit at the table, so you can actually elevate and lower tables and chairs quite a bit and Sims can still use them. So it was a sneaky little trick that helped me get the perfect alignment without having to change everything. Anyway, that's basically what I did to create this horrible feast with a very creepy roast beast. Now hopefully the bugs will get fixed. It seems to be an issue mostly with Macs because I've tested out my game in Windows and it works perfectly, so I hope the bugs get fixed and I can get back to creating my big crazy epic builds. But until then, I'm going to be focusing on some smaller things like this. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got some ideas for your own creations. Feel free to play around with this, download it from the gallery, rearrange the pieces, and maybe come up with your own feast clutter. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. As always, guys, I love you so freaking much.